Good morning, everybody. My name is Austin Northland with Bearing Insurance, and welcome to our webinar on employee experience and engagement in a changing workplace. We'll be covering what makes an employee or an engaged workforce, driving productivity, retention, innovation, factors impacting employee engagement, and more. But a little housekeeping before we begin. This webinar will be recorded and it will be shared with everyone registered at the conclusion of the webinar. Feel free to place your questions in the chat feature as you think of them throughout the webinar. We will also be having a Q&A session at the end. But presenting today is Jamie Hasty from SESCO Management Consultants, and we've partnered with SESCO for many years. Since 1949, SESCO has provided human resource and employee relations consulting throughout the country. And if you are a client of ours, we encourage you to take advantage of your access to SESCO. We'll talk a little bit more about this later, but just ask your insurance executive how you can gain access and we can assist you with that. But without any further ado, I will turn it over to Jamie Hasty, Vice President of SESCO Management Consultants.
Thank you, Austin, and good morning, everybody. It's nice to be back. Today's topic, as Austin mentioned, is employee experience and engagement. And it is a topic that obviously, especially with changes in the workforce, demands from the workforce, it really is an important topic. And whether you are a small independent business or a very large, 100 or more employees, multiple locations, so on and so forth, it's really, really important that we as leaders, as business owners, continue to focus on the culture, the engagement, because it drives retention, it drives productivity, it drives satisfaction, and it reduces internal conflict. So today we're going to kind of talk a little bit about those things as an introductory, and then certainly if you have follow-up questions, you can reach out to SESCO. We can talk more one-on-one about those, but as Austin mentioned, please feel free to use the chat feature as we go along today, and I will do my best to answer questions in real time. So kind of our game plan for the next 45 minutes to an hour is let's talk about why engagement matters today. Workforce expectations have shifted, okay? In the post-COVID world, COVID was kind of a catalyst for so many things, right? We were in a hot economy already. Recruitment was difficult. People were jumping all over for money. And it was an employee market, so to speak. And COVID further drove a lot of that as well. We saw a huge push in obviously hybrid work environments, work from home, use of technology, which is great. But all of those, transitions and the workforce expectations also have unintended or unexpected outcomes as well, right? So when you get a fully remote team or a hybrid team, there's not that one-on-one human interaction in person. Sometimes there's a disconnect. It can bring communication challenges, productivity challenges, all these things. So the workforce expectations have shifted. Today's workers demanding more and more from their employers, not just in wages and benefits and all of that, which obviously is important, but they're also demanding work-life balance and being treated fairly and respectfully, and they want to do work that is meaningful to them and important to them, where they feel good, or they can see that they're making an impact or a difference, and how that ties into obviously their own core values and beliefs. So the market is demanding a much more grand scheme of focus on engagement, appreciation, recognition of all of the efforts that our employees are giving us, right? So that engagement does drive productivity. When you have happy employees, when you have good relationships, when you're treating them as a valued member of the team, they're likely going to produce more. Why? Because I'm happy. I'm not grumbling. I'm not, just merely complying to get by. And that productivity, that engagement is directly related to retention. Still, the number one reason why employees leave organizations is a lack of relationship. Okay. If I am not fostering trust, respect, a relationship with my employees, they have no reason to want to remain at my organization. I don't know them. I don't know what makes them tick. They don't trust me, or they don't have, a comfort level with me as their manager. And so one of the things, especially with retention, that I look at in organizations is I look at the supervisor first in a department. What's going on? So retention is big and tied back into engagement. And also, it's really important that when we talk about engagement, anybody that has a supervisory or leadership capacity, engagement is everybody's responsibility, not just your office manager, not just HR to do the warm, fuzzy things. It's everybody. Everybody has to be in tandem in order for it to work. So we're going to look at recognition and feedback programs. How do you leverage technology to improve experience? Some of you all may already be utilizing certain technological aspects to make life easier, right? For work. And others may say, well, I'm interested in it, but I don't think I'm big enough. There are ways that you can, leverage that technology to improve experience. But remember that experience starts from day one. And then more importantly, how do we measure engagement? How do we adjust our strategies? What's working, what's not? And we'll talk about those surveys. So I talk a lot in leadership courses that I've done, and perhaps I've done the leadership for Bearing as well in the past. I believe I have. But I talk a lot about commitment versus compliance, right? Whether that be emotional or physical commitment to doing a good job, showing up on time, trusting my supervisor, going above and beyond, whatever it may be. And again, a lot of managers, a lot of supervisors and organizations, because of the culture of the organization, or they're kind of set in their ways, or maybe they're not as outgoing or type A as other managers, and none of that is a bad thing, right? But they're managing their teams out of compliance. They are demanding respect, telling them what they have to do. It's that because I said so mentality, right? And so there are situations and times where, as a leader, you're going to have to draw that line, right? Look, you may not like it, I may not like it, but because I said so, we got to do it. But what we really need to focus on from a culture and employee engagement perspective is that I want those employees to commit to me and to the organization, right? I want them to trust me. I want them to respect me. I want them to know that I have their best interests, that, I will roll up my sleeves and get dirty with them as well, that if I'm asking them to do something, it's not because I'm trying to make their life harder. It's because I trust them, or I believe in them, or I know they're the perfect person for this, or I need their support because they have more knowledge on this topic than I might have, right? So with this commitment, there's buy-in, right? Employees are going to buy into what we're asking them to do. They see the bigger picture. They understand the players involved. They understand why the job, the task, the project, the ask is important to the overall efforts, right? And so engagement is all about willingness and desire and connection, right? So I do also talk a lot about the line of sight of an organization. And you can talk about that obviously in the very beginning from day one through your orientation project process. But I need my employees, whether they are a senior vice president or a hourly part-time receptionist, doesn't matter. I need them to understand the line of sight of the organization. Here's where we're at. Here's where we're headed. Here's how each department functions. Here is why your role is so critical in accomplishing all of these aspects. Not just the vision and the mission, those things are important too, but why we actually exist, how we actually perform the job, right? When employees feel connected to a higher purpose, they are passionate about it. They have ownership in that because they understand my action or inaction is going to have a domino effect, right? So that connection, that willingness to invest their effort, and then the ability for them to see the fruits of their labor, right? Having that solid recognition, that feedback, and making that an everyday culture aspect is all part of employee engagement. So, employee experience versus engagement. You can have really, really engaged employees that are working hard, that are, showing up, doing what they need to do, but that does not mean that their experience is a good one, right? The engagement is going to be the outcome of that experience. So when we look at employee experience, it starts from the time that they apply. How quickly did somebody get back with them? How was the interview process? How was the onboarding process? How were the touch points? Did they get, weekly or monthly check-ins, or was it just, here you go, throw you to the wolves? And oh, by the way, I'm not gonna sit down with them until their annual evaluation. What type of crucial conversations or one-on-ones, what type of recognition did I get throughout my experience? And then, as employees exit, what does that exit look like? And was it a supportive exit? Yes, there are situations where obviously we have to separate employment and those things may not always be warm and fuzzy depending on the circumstances, right? But when somebody is leaving through no fault of their own, was it as positive as possible experience? Look, they didn't have the rumor mill, the gossip, the, guilt, all of that, right? So the experience that they have day in and day out, and the experience that started from the time that they applied for the job is going to drive your engagement. If they had a negative experience, they're going to be disengaged. They will comply. Okay. So with engagement and experience, you have to look at all of these processes and systems and where can we make things better and easier for our employees, which again ties back into engagement and satisfaction. So if we have hybrid or remote models, those things are wonderful. Look, I work remotely. And I'm sure many of you all do, but that also comes with some challenges too, right? So I think, depending on the industry that you're in, depending on the positions, there are certain positions that, look, remote or hybrid work is great. There are other industries that obviously remote and hybrid work does not work at all. And we can't do it. And so I think communicating the why, because I'm seeing a lot of requests from employees of my clients wanting to work remotely or in a hybrid situation. And so, instead of just shooting that down, Maybe it doesn't work. Maybe it's just not feasible for that position or that role or your organization at the time because of many circumstances in play. But instead of saying just no, explain the why, right? Again, we're going back to the experience. Okay. So hybrid and remote models are wonderful because they do allow us to be somewhat flexible. It does allow us to kind of find that work-life balance, that well-being that a lot of the workforce is demanding and has been demanding for many, many years. They want to work smarter, not harder. I want to be able to dip out at 2 o'clock on a Tuesday because my kid has a awards ceremony at school or a play at school, and I don't want to miss that. I don't want to have to take PTO. Um, Again, those models are great. They may not work for everybody. But also you're up against sometimes those multi-generational workforces where management has a different opinion of hybrid or remote work compared to some of the younger generation that may be in play, that basically says, look, I can do this from anywhere. I can log in, I can be productive, I can be engaged, I can be on Teams or Zoom or, um, you know, uh, whatever system you might be using, because that technology has shaped the communication, right? I mean, 6 years ago, many organizations were just now getting into GoToMeetings and Zoom, or maybe they had Slack, but they weren't really using it to the full capability. And now, everything is Teams. We're on Teams right now. The chat, the connections, all of that. So it can help form those relationships, but we have to keep a pulse on it, right? So humans by nature need that one-on-one interaction, and they also need that in-person interaction. So a hybrid model is nice because I can do a day or two from home, but I also can still be in the office with the rest of my team, and it allows me to, you know, understand tone and inflection and read body language and all of that. But honestly, being on camera allows us to do that in many ways as well. So, look at what works and what does not. There might be some positions that a hybrid or remote model works great for. And there may be others within your organization that it's not feasible because of cost or distance or the type of work that they're doing. But more importantly, be able to explain that aspect, right? From a recruitment and retention standpoint, most employees are looking nowadays for a hybrid or a remote model. So if you don't offer it, that is something to kind of take a step back, reflect, challenge it. May not change the outcome. You may still not be able to offer it, but it's something that they're looking for. Core drivers of engagement. First and foremost, trust and leadership. Okay. They have to trust us. If there is backbiting, undercutting, questionable decisions being made by leadership, if there are misunderstandings or confusion on the messaging amongst leaders within the organization on what we're doing or a decision or whatever, that breeds distrust. Okay. They don't know what to believe, who to follow, what to, what's true, what's not. So we have to foster that relationship. Employees, one of the biggest things I think from a recruitment intention and engagement is making sure that we're hiring the right people, right? One of the questions that I always ask is, why do you want to come work here? Why are why are you looking to make a transition? And what interests you specifically about this role here? And when sometimes candidates give you that generic, oh, I'm looking for a better opportunity. No, tell me more. Why? Because I want to make sure that they are really going to be a good fit for the organization. And I think a lot of times because of time constraints or turnover or whatever it may be, that we often hire reactively instead of proactively. And so we need to shift our mindset on that. So what I often do is I talk about, what's important to you in your job. How do you like to be managed? What do you value in a leader? What do you value in work? How do you like to receive feedback? Those are types of questions that you should be exploring, because then I can tie in those desires, those needs, their interests into meaningful work and purpose. Okay. Um, Again, that goes back to the line of sight. So yes, we're in business to make a profit. Yes, we offer a product or a service, or we're serving a client, whatever your business model is. But there's more to the organization through that line of sight that makes you all an important place to work, right? Maybe it's about your community involvement, giving back, philanthropic situations. Maybe one of the goals is to grow up the next generation of service technicians or bankers or healthcare workers. So, use those things to drive engagement. What makes your organization important? And why does leadership really value that, right? Also, we should be looking at recognition and growth opportunities. Nobody wants to come work at an organization where it's a dead end opportunity, honestly, right? So if I start at this level, how could I grow through training and development or additional education or whatever? What does that career path look like, right? Where is that growth? And there will always be circumstances where the growth is kind of capped, okay? But then we need to get creative. Do we do additional mentorship? Do we do cross training? And this is also really, really important for the younger generation. They don't want to feel stagnant. They don't want to feel stifled. They want to continue to grow. So that is a large, large aspect of culture that you should be looking at for your organization. And also recognition, you know, doing a 90-day evaluation or an annual evaluation, it's not going to cut it anymore in today's workforce, right? Employees want to see more frequent recognition, more frequent touch points. I have a lot of clients that are actually moving to like quarterly, less formal evals. But they're scheduling, 45 minutes to an hour every quarter to sit down. It allows for goal development, feedback on both sides. And it allows also for course correction earlier than, waiting for 6 months or a year. Also, one of the big aspects in leadership and trust in that leadership is making sure we have the right leaders in place. Not everybody is a leader. There's a huge difference between being a manager and a leader. Obviously, you're going to wear both hats all day, every day. But if I have ineffective management, that is going to breed significant distrust, right? If I can't trust my manager to follow through, if I can't trust them to have my back, if I can't trust them to do the right thing, I'm going to be significantly disengaged. Okay. And then we also look at communication and inclusion. I am a full proponent that every organization should have a communication plan, a strategy, both for the organization as a whole and within departments, especially when it comes to decisions, changes, information that is going to be critical or important for me to do my job. The role of leadership. Let's talk about that. So leaders should be communicating both clearly and consistently all day long, right? It is really, really critical to also get your leaders trained on emotional intelligence and communication. Communication is the number one issue in every organization, right? So when I am providing feedback or I am communicating with my employees, I always want to demonstrate empathy. You can be empathetic without making excuses or accepting poor behavior or bad behavior. Using those, I hear you. I understand your point of view. I see it differently, but thank you for sharing. You can be empathetic and supportive at the same time. More importantly, you have to recognize contributions individually. Um, so when I'm giving feedback and communicating, maybe my team hit a huge goal. Number one, I'm going to communicate, hey guys, we hit this, couldn't have done it without you. And I also want to draw a special, note to this person, and there's this person. And I'm going to be specific in that. Okay. When I do employee feedback surveys, one of the areas that always pops is communication and recognition as low. And it is because employees feel like the only time they hear from their leaders is when they're doing something wrong, right? So we also need to kind of shift our focus. You're still going to have to address the things that they're doing that aren't correct, right? But you also should be shifting your mindset that feedback communication should be every single day, all day. Okay. Coaching should be every day. And then you also want to build that psychological safety, right? That, employees are sharing important and necessary information with you, and that you are not misusing that information in a way that would be detrimental to the employee. So with culture, how do we build a culture of engagement? Obviously, you need a strong and clear mission and shared purpose, but that also has to be shared down, right? So going back to that line of sight from day one, talking about that, looking at um, how their action or inaction and their role in that mission and shared purpose, right? They truly need to understand what their role is there, right? And I think also organizations that have a real engaged culture are constantly seeking feedback for their employees. How can we do this better? What's working? What's not? Tell me more. And those employees are not getting their hands slapped for providing that feedback, even when it's perhaps not always glowing recommendations or positive feedback. Um, Employees need to feel safe with that. So open communication. Communication has to be shared freely, up, down, side to side, all around, right? And that I am also, more importantly, holding all employees accountable, but with support, right? One of the biggest culture killers that I see over many, many years is when managers are not holding employees accountable. It creates so much more conflict, not just between the manager and that employee, but also all of their coworkers, right? Um, because employees feel like, well, look, why am I going to kill myself? Why am I going to go above and beyond? Why am I going to do these things when this person over here doesn't do what they're supposed to do and nothing happens to them? Right? And they don't always know the conversations behind closed doors, but we have to be accountable. I'm accountable to me, but I am also, as a manager, accountable to you. I am only as good as my team. And I think when we take that approach and that accountability, and I, demonstrate that consistently to my team, and I have communicated that expectation to them as well, that look, you need to hold me accountable and vice versa. It fosters that teamwork and that collaboration versus just having like a micromanagement culture, right? So with communication, communicate. Sometimes you feel like you're over communicating, but it's got to be a two-way dialogue. Look, if I'm just telling you what to do, that's not communication. That's not a dialogue. It's got to be back and forth, right? So train your managers on that. Make sure we have consistent messaging so that we are not muddying the waters there. That's really important as well. Use your technology. use an HRIS system, use a learning management system, use Teams, Outlook, Slack, Jabber, whatever it is that you all are using or want to use, find ways to leverage that technology. If you have an HRIS system, there's a lot of ways that you can do feedback and surveys through that, evaluations, touch points, things to collaborate on. With the growth and development aspect, that's where a learning management system can also provide that training in real time in lieu of them going out to conferences or offsite training. Both are great, right? But look at the technology. Sometimes it's cost prohibitive. I understand that. But what could we be doing to make our employees' lives easier where they're getting the necessary information and the necessary support within real time as best as possible so that they can do their jobs? What information needs to be communicated and how do we leverage that technology? Look, maybe sending Teams messages or Teams chat is not the best way to get, a notice across. People have email fatigue. People have screen fatigue. So, again, ask your employees, what do they want? How do you want to receive this information? How do you want to receive recognition? What type of platforms would be meaningful to you? So use that. Also, with recognition, it's got to be timely and specific. Okay. If I just constantly say, oh, thanks, I appreciate you, don't get me wrong, that is wonderful, right? But what are you thanking me for? What specifically are you appreciative of that I did that's so great? And why is that meaningful to you, right? So I always use the employee's name. Thank you, Austin, for, being very supportive and empathetic when, I got sick and I missed a deadline or I couldn't do this. Your communication, your timeliness was so valued. I really appreciate it, right? I was specific. Number one, it's authentic. It was meaningful. I aligned that back to what I value from a cultural perspective within the organization and the expectations of the job. And I specifically recognize what she did that was helpful. Okay. And that same approach should be done both in the formal evaluation, but also informal methods. I want to make as much contact with my employees on a day-to-day basis as I possibly can. Why? Because then I'm in the know, what's going on, what's working, what's not working, but it allows me to recognize not just the team efforts, but the individual efforts so that I can have that one-on-one and say, oh my gosh, I watched you handle that irate client or customer situation beautifully. You were calm, you were cool, you were collected, you stuck with policy and procedure, you were helpful, you brought it back and turned that customer around and diffused it, whatever. I can do those things in real time if I am making myself available for observation, which again, is difficult when we have sometimes remote work, right? But formal and informal methods of recognition. It doesn't always have to be about money. Okay. Please, thank you. Specific feedback, bringing them lunch or bringing in food always makes everybody happy. Okay. But then you also have to be careful about like food allergies. But who doesn't love getting breakfast one morning, especially if they've been working late or overtime this week to, roll out a new product or a service and we're on a tight deadline. Like those sorts of things, recognizing their efforts and showing sincere appreciation for that does not go unnoticed. Okay. It's when we just, say, well, suck it up, buttercup. We're all in it together and we just got to get it done. And there's no acknowledgement there. That's when employees walk away with that experience feeling undervalued. Okay. Employees need to have feedback and a voice. SESCO is a strong proponent of personnel opinion surveys, employee and management opinion surveys. Here's my caveat. Okay. Please don't create your own survey. What you need to do is have a statistically valid and reliable survey that is going to give you meaningful data as a starting point. Okay. Um, you should be doing surveys at least annually, if not every other year. You can do engagement surveys. You can do what we call stay surveys. Look, why do you stay here? What do you love about working here? And why haven't you left? You certainly want to do that in a way where employees feel comfortable that they can share their feedback without fear of retaliation. One of the worst things that I have seen organizations do over the years is they say, we want your feedback. And either A, they get that feedback, they don't like what that feedback says, and the management uses that in, I don't want to say true retaliation, but employees get their hands slapped a little bit. I can't believe you said that about me, or I don't see it like that. This is why we don't do surveys because all you did was blast me, whatever it may be. Employees need to feel safe to do that, and they want to do that through an anonymous channel, which is why a lot of organizations will outsource those survey documents and the data and let a consultant or another group handle it, so that there is a separation there between the survey and management. But more importantly, the second aspect there is don't do a survey if you're going to get the results and then sit on it and do nothing. Okay. Every organization is going to have significant strong points and areas of opportunity, right? Um, it's what we do with that feedback once we get the raw data, as well as additional feedback and comments from employees, that matters. Okay. So give them the opportunity to share their feedback, right? Whether that be in the annual evaluation, a annual survey, a stay survey, a culture and engagement survey, all of that. Do them all. Do them all. But give them an opportunity to provide that feedback as well. Okay. Manager impact. Make sure that your managers or leaders understand that they make or break the organization. They are shaping that daily experience. Make sure they have the tools and the skill sets to be the best version of themselves, right? That they are giving clear, smart goals, clear expectations that are qualitative and quantitative, that they are coaching employees and getting them back on track, that they are available and supportive of their staff members, growth and development, as well as the organizational success, and that they are influencing that morale and that retention by having good skill sets there. Okay. We talked about how do we measure that. So a few things that I'm going to look at, I mentioned this earlier, is I look at turnover and retention data, especially if there are certain specific shifts and/or departments where there are outliers or skewed data. Then I'm looking at the manager, what's going on there. I'm going to look at exit and stay interviews. I'm looking at productivity, absenteeism trends. All of that data helps us gain a pulse on some gaps that we may have or things that may not be working. Don't underestimate the power of an exit interview. They will oftentimes tell you all sorts of things. And then you turn that data into action. Do an organizational action plan as a whole, then break it out into specifics for the department. And employees need to see those results. Okay. Look, here's what the data told us. Here's the feedback that you gave us. Here's what our action plan is. Again, accountability, right? You expect your employees to be accountable for their actions. They expect leadership to be accountable for, following that action plan as well, moving forward, right? So share those results and involve them in helping to develop that action plan, right? What's working, what's not? What could we be doing better? What are your thoughts? How do we do it differently, right? Instead of shooting the messenger, gain their input. Why? Because when employees feel like they have a say, decisions or changes that impact how and why they do their work, they are more apt to follow through with it. Again, they're more engaged, right? So you develop that plan collaboratively, then you roll it out, and then you need to track, remeasure, adjust, rinse, and repeat. Okay, it is a constant evolution um, of of that data and progress there. Okay. Some common engagement mistakes. Look, one size fits all does not work, right? What worked in one organization or one department may not work in your current organization or in your current department, right? So keep an open mind. Don't ignore manager capabilities, right? And don't solely focus only on the perks. There are going to be uncomfortable days or aspects of any business, right? Yes, we want to remind them of the good, but you also don't want to ignore the things that are not so warm and fuzzy or comfortable, right? So what do we do now? Increase your visibility. Make sure that you are available, you are around, you are touching base, you are working on your recognition practices, that we're not only just, giving feedback when they're doing something wrong, but I'm also acknowledging all of the good that they do. Even the good that they're just supposed to be doing. Work on or consider doing pulse surveys. And, through those surveys, have those critical conversations. Make sure that we're keeping our eyes peeled for workload and burnout, both from staffing levels. When employees do feel overburdened or burnt out, engagement is obviously going to go down. So try to anticipate that and have game plan for support to address that as well. If you're going through some change, make sure that you are communicating daily and you're being frequent with that and honest with that, right? Again, especially if there are changes going on, restructures or changes in how we're doing business or the product or services that we're offering, they need to see leadership together as a united front. They need to see that leadership is here, that they're available, I can ask them questions, so on and so forth. And again, continue that recognition, especially during times of uncertainty. So engagement is going to drive our performance. That experience from day one through the time that they end with us is going to determine their engagement level, right? So look at your experience, look at the processes, look at the systems we have in place. Can we be better? Can we do better to make life easier and have it to be a more positive experience? Have good leaders, invest in your leaders, give them the tools and the resources they need to really pour back into others as well, right? Don't underestimate the power of mentorship, coaching. The soft skill is really, really critical. And focus on continuous improvement. If we're not willing to grow and challenge and be better and do better ourselves, you're going to have middle of the road engagement. Okay. Questions, comments, thoughts on engagement? I'm going to check the chat feature here. As a reminder, we will be sharing a copy of the PowerPoint with you. So if you have any questions, you can circle back with me. I'd be more than happy to address those. Austin did mention at the beginning of our session that we do have a partnership with Bearing. There are certain clients that do have or have the ability to access SESCO for basic telephone and email consulting and some handbook review services. If you are interested in that, please reach out to your account manager and we can get you all squared away there with that enrollment process. So, Austin, I don't see any questions, so I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Yeah, no, I don't see anything either. I'll give another minute or so for you all to enter any last minute questions before we wrap it up for today.